You're in the right place. Hello, I'm Dan Harris.
Hi, and I'm Claudia Köstler.
You're over here, over there. Welcome to Over Here, Over There, a global conversation about how we see others and others see us. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dan Harris, along with Claudia Köstler, senior editor of the Süddeutsche Zeitung, as my other co-host. You can send us your feedback on this episode via our website at overhereoverthere.org or contact us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Our special guest today has risen from the relative obscurity over the past 3 years to be recognized by fans across a crowded New York City street. Such is the worldwide popularity of the TV show The Great British Bake Off, which he won in 2021, under stiff competition, I must add, and now is climbing the name recognition ladder, which, who knows, may lead him to be a household name like Gordon or Jamie or one of his Great British Bake Off predecessors, Nadia. I'm speaking about, of course, Giuseppe Dell'Anno. If you watched the series, you may have gleaned that he is a man of many talents, which we'll discuss, of course, but we'll be concentrating mostly on his skills as a top-notch baker and his mastery of and passion for Italian cuisine and culture. And I must say that he is one of the nicest people you can meet. So welcome, Giuseppe.
Wow, thank you very much. Good morning.
And
buongiorno.
Yeah, buongiorno. And Claudia, over to you.
Hello, and buongiorno, Giuseppe. It's so great to have you here, over there. I'd offer you an espresso and a cornetto, of course, but maybe that would be a bit inappropriate. I mean, you being a master baker, a winner of the Great British Bake Off show. Congratulations from my side, by the way. I wouldn't dare to offer you anything mass-produced, to be honest. So, to be frank, when was the last time that anyone dared to offer you something like that from a supermarket shelf, or do you grab something off there yourself?
Well, it happens more often than I like to admit, I'm afraid. Convenience is something very difficult to give up. Can I just say, though, first of all, thank you for that lovely introduction. I mean, I'm flattered, guys. I've never been introduced with such lovely words before. I'm not sure I deserve that, but thank you very much. And yeah, going back to the point of industrial confectionery, funnily enough, that's probably one of the main reasons why I started baking in Hungary in the first place. As all Italians, I'm unashamedly snob when it comes to food. And when I became a dad myself, I couldn't bear the thought of feeding my kids industrial baked goods. So I had to master the art of bread making and cake baking so that they could have something more genuine and home-baked for their breakfast and snacks. So yeah, if I can avoid it, I'd rather make it myself. But as I said, the temptation is too great. And sometimes you've got to grab that sandwich if you're in a hurry. And all of us are.
Yes.
Indeed.
Well, I mean, having Italian heritage myself and a proud holder of an Italian passport, I must say, I'm curious about what region in Italy you're from and what influences that had on your cookery skills.
Well, so I was born in Rome, so I'm originally from Lazio, which is a region in central Italy. And my hometown is a very little coastal town between Rome and Naples. And having such big cities next door, almost at the same distance, has had, great influence of the culture and culinary background of my hometown. Admittedly, my culture is probably closer to the Neapolitan type of lifestyle, mostly because Gaeta, which is the name of my hometown, used to be part of the Neapolitan kingdom up to just, less than 2 centuries ago. So we felt a lot of influence from that side of the country. But we were also part of the papal, so the Vatican state back in the days. So there is a lot of influence from Rome as well. I mean, I think that's probably the pizza that you can buy in my hometown is a very good example of this concoction of cultures, because you can find both the traditional Neapolitan round single-serving pizza in Gaeta, as well as what you would call pizza in teglia, so pizza in a tray, which is the typical takeaway pizza that you find at every corner in Rome. So I think that probably, my background is fair to say is a bit of a hybrid between the Roman and the Neapolitan lifestyle. But then I moved to Tuscany when I was 18 to study at university, and I spent 10 years over there. So I have sort of grown in that space as well. And that's where I met my wife, who's from Puglia, from the very south of Italy. And I've embraced that culture as well. It's a lovely, wild region, Puglia, and that's definitely where I want to spend my later years. So I've tried to learn as much as possible of their culinary register, and I've made some of that mine, I have to say. So it's very difficult to pinpoint a single place, but I would say that probably I'm closer to the sort of central southern cuisine.
And pizza was invented in Naples, right?
That's what people say. I wasn't there, so I cannot possibly witness it. But apparently, it was invented in Naples, and I was lucky enough to have my very first pizza in Naples at the ripe age of 47, only during the Christmas break, and I can vouch for that in terms of goodness and affordability. I was stunned by being able to buy a margherita for €5 in the center of Naples. And what a pizza that was. Proper good
Just
stuff.
to go back a little bit to Bake Off. I mean, Bake Off is such an iconic show. It's being watched worldwide in a way. And now you're worldwidely recognized, of course. What has surprised you the most in the aftermath of the win?
Well, first of all, exactly what you said, Claudia. I knew that Bake Off is still a bit of an institution here in the UK. And, I've been being a fan of the show myself. I was expecting a certain level of attention. But what surprised me is the following that the show has got overseas. Americans love the show. And I ended up through social media getting some very lovely messages of support from all over the place, literally. You name it, Hong Kong, Hawaii, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, most of which came from second or third generation Italians that have found themselves living abroad. And that's probably the most pleasant aftermath of the show. The fact that lots of people could rekindle themselves with old family recipes through my bakes, which is something that I never expected. And it gave me massive pleasure to be part of that little, family history again. There are a lot of anecdotes that I could bring up of people that found their grandparents' biscotti in my books and were very happy to finally have the recipe again after their grandparents never wrote it down anywhere.
Right.
In pure old-fashioned Italian style. You never write a recipe down anywhere. And they were very happy to find it again. And that gave me massive pleasure.
We might get inundated with a lot of requests here for things. Or they could just buy your books, actually. That's a better idea. That's a better idea.
Yeah, please do, because the mortgage rates have gone up big time, so I need as much money as I can get.
Exactly. Your father was a professional chef or baker?
My dad started off his career as a help on cruise ships. And my hometown being a coastal town, it hosts one of the very few secondary schools that prepare kids to a life in the sea. And my dad went to that school and he started sailing when he was only 19 years old. And he keeps telling, my grandmother used to tell me that he shipped off when he was 19 for his first contract, and when he came back he was over 21, so he stayed like 28 weeks away for his first employment, and then obviously he could have gone many ways, but he started to work in the kitchens of these cruise ships, and he ended up becoming a pastry chef on board. So he was a professional baker by trade, and he ended up then working in catering services for school when he decided to leave the seas. But he was a passionate chef as well. So I would say probably by trade, by education, he became a pastry chef, but he's always been cooking at home for the family, for family and friends. So I had that massive culinary presence in the family above me. But yeah, that certainly had an influence on my background, but he wasn't the only one. I am lucky enough to come from a family of people that are very much into cooking. And, I remember vividly during my Christmas dinners, we never spoke about politics or money or religion or sport. But the topic of discussion has always been who cooked what and how, where was the recipe from. I mean, food has always been the love language across the extended family. So wherever I look around myself, great aunties, uncles, cousins, there is always somebody with great skills in that space. So I've been very spoiled by that.
And what about your mother? Was she also a cook or very good?
My mom was very good at eating, not very good at cooking. She still is. So she was the one who decided who would be getting presents for Christmas and Easter, who would be getting the trays of biscuits. But she did a lot of washing up for my dad. Wow. But no more than that. But I have to say that sort also had a bit of an influence on me, as it's always the case. Obviously, your parents do drive your personality big time. In the sense that my family was very much a matriarchal family, where my mom used to keep hold of the family budget. She made all the big decisions at home. My dad was very much a house husband in a way. He used to have a full-time job, of course, but he's always been the one cooking for us, doing the shopping for us, carrying us around. So I think that from the way I've interpreted that now in later life is that has left me with a conception of gender stereotypes that is very far from the usual. So when I hear people speaking about gender roles to these days, still surprises me, because I grew up in a family where my mom and dad had exactly a 50-50 split of responsibilities. There was nobody necessarily leading the other. It was very much between peers. I suppose that's the reason why my wife now has got pretty much the same approach to family life as my mom used to have. We split things very much equally between us, and there is no such a thing as a man's job or a woman's job. I bought dolls for my boys when they were kids, and I've bought a sewing machine for my second, because he's very much into creative arts, which is something that a lot of my friends found very weird, but it doesn't really look weird to me in this life.
You're such a modern man. You and your dad are very modern men.
Possibly. I don't know. It's not for me to say.
Okay. Well, I've watched Great British Bake Off over the years. I must say that 2021 was a high watermark in terms of talent and expertise. I mean, you guys were really off the charts. I mean, not only you, but Jürgen, Christelle, and Jigs, and really the whole cohort of bakers on display that year was quite amazing. Most of your bakes, for instance, looked very precise and simply sublime, coupled with your, Italian flair, of course. How did your engineering prowess, though, help you on the show? And can you share a bit about your creative process and where you draw your inspiration for your bakes?
Oh, that's a good one. I remember when I was on the show, one of the things that I proudly showed off was my ruler and my spirit level, which are a big part of my baking tools. I couldn't possibly conceive baking without measuring in centimeters exactly what you're doing. And I suppose that comes from my engineering side. And the good question would be whether I am like that because I'm an engineer, or whether I am an engineer because I am like that. I'm slightly obsessed by details and the accuracy of things, and I would never forgive myself if I would deliver, I don't know, a batch of 12 mini rolls and they were not exactly 8 centimeters each.
Right.
But I suppose, yeah, exactly. But I suppose that pays off in a show like Bake Off, when they are looking for consistency between the different bakes and accuracy with the flavor distribution, etc. So definitely my engineering skills let me a lot. There was a lot of, and there is still a lot of Excel spreadsheets going on in my creative process. When you scale down and scale up recipes based on the size of your tins, it does go through a lot of mathematical calculation. And I have to say, you mentioned Jürgen there. One of the things that I did as soon as I met him on the show, I thought, well, I've got a German in the vicinity, I've got to ask for the original Stollen recipe. Stollen is something that I've always loved, big time. The more marzipan, the better. Right. But I'd never done it myself. And so I did ask Jürgen for that recipe, and I was walking like in midair when he came back and he sent me an email with an Excel spreadsheet himself. And he said, depending on how many people you need to feed, you just feed the number and the spreadsheet will tell you what the recipe is. And I was like, Jürgen, I found finally somebody that thinks along the same line. It looks like I'm much more German than I ever thought I was.
You two were just amazing.
You in person and make sure that this is correct,
Yeah, I'll have to make a Stollen and pass it by you, Claudia, so you can give me your blessing.
Absolutely. Maybe even a handshake,
But mine is not as well regarded as Paul's, I'm afraid, but fair enough. I'm more than happy to share that.
Excellent. I have read an interview done with you, and there I read that you now notice subtleties in the show much more than you did before when you were just a viewer. But you didn't specify what subtleties, for example. And I'm a bit curious. Could you tell me a bit more?
It's nothing particularly. It's nothing to set the world on fire. But one of the things that struck me while I was on set was, I was captivated by the mechanics of the show and how much effort goes into making it look so effortless and seamless. And as a viewer, I never appreciated how complex that is. I mean, obviously, even somebody that watches the show for the first time, they cannot help but noticing that the tent goes from a very messy state of being cake carnage to being spotless clean when they do the beauty shots around the cakes, and there is no towel on inside, there is no flour anywhere, everything is spotless. So you would expect that there is a lot of people putting a lot of effort into making it clean and tidy between shots, and that's obviously what happens. But I never expected people having to put together rails for sliding the cameras on during the beauty shots, or having 30 bake-off elves that come out in a storm and move very gingerly your bakes around. I would never want to have that job, because obviously the responsibility is massive, especially when you've got very delicate bakes. They have to move them out, clean the bench, and put them back in place. It's a very complex mechanism. There were over 140 people on set, and everything works like clockwork. You've got lots of people in the tent. There are like 13 cameras with cameramen, sound guys, all the producers, and you never ever see one hand slipping in shot accidentally. So all of that, when I saw it happening behind the screen, I was amazed to the point that I thought, if I was 20 years old again, I would probably choose television as a career, because it's so fascinating to see how things work behind the scene. Admittedly, I was lucky because Bake Off is a high-profile show and it's a high-budget show, so they can afford all of that, work and labor and people. I'm not sure whether it's the same everywhere else in television, but certainly it was fascinating for me to see. And now when I watch the show, I realize what's been happening between one shot and the next. And I'm like, I know exactly who did that and where and what's going on just before taking that shot. And, it feels like you've almost got a third eye and you can see angles and perspective that the normal viewer wouldn't be able to see. And it's a bit of a privilege for me, obviously.
And were you surprised by any edits when you watched it back?
I wasn't surprised. In a way, I was... first of all, I didn't envy the editors, because they have to go through shed loads of hours of footage, and they distill 2 full days of footage into a 1-hour show. So it must be a thankless job to do that. But I suppose that's how the show ends up looking so pristine and polished, because they've got lots of material to go through. The bit of editing that surprised me was the fact that the judges provide a lot of feedback when they judge the cakes and the bakes. So they say the same things in many different ways to provide the editors with lots of different snippets so that they can edit it into something that is coherent and makes sense. So the judging lasts much longer than you see on TV. And especially in the early episodes when there's 12 bakers and 12 bakes to judge at each challenge, that makes for very long shooting days. We started at 6:30 in the morning and sometimes we finished at 7 in the evening. So it's a long process, and the judges put a lot of effort into that. But I suppose that the one surprise I had was the fact that you are truly portrayed for what you are. There is that lingering, almost a scary thought at the back of your head when you go on a show like that, and you're like, how am I going to be portrayed? How are people going to perceive me? What sort of image the editors are going to give of myself? Because obviously they can play it whichever way they like, and they could emphasize some minutiae in the show and make them bigger than they are, or play over some other big things. For me, that never happened. I cannot speak for everybody and for all the seasons, but certainly that wasn't my personal experience. And I was genuinely portrayed for what I believe I am. So it's what you see is what you get in a show like that. And I was told that was the case. But being very cynical, I only truly believed that when I actually saw the first episode of the show. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can breathe a sigh of relief. Nothing scary is going to come out of this.
Did you have to sign any waiver? Not to...
Any waiver? Claudia, there is an amount of paperwork that goes behind I became very familiar with British legal term because of that exercise. Yes, there is a lot of stuff to sign. Okay. Definitely. I understand that. I'm not exactly a spring chicken. I'm closer to my 50s, so wow. 50s, sadly. So I've seen a lot of this before, and it's understandable how they want to be protective and they want to protect the brand as much as possible, and they take all precautions. Also, I was the 12th installment of the show. They are now in season 14, so they've done this for long enough, and they know. It looks like they've been honing their paperwork to make sure that they are fully protected, and I understand that. You can't blame them for it. It's a big brand, and they want to make sure that it's not tarnished in any possible way.
You made your success through the Great British Bake Off. We know you for that, but I don't know how many people know that you've got a PhD in engineering as well. You're a man of many talents, but there was far more to your skills in Italian cuisine than our listeners may know. Can you please enlighten us about your background as far as your choice between engineering and baking and Italian cuisine? Where does your heart really lie?
Oh my God, that is a $1 million question. I genuinely do not know whether I will ever be able to answer that question. I chose engineering because I loved it. And the way the engineering degree was structured in Italy when I did it in the late 90s, you could only go through it if you really loved it. It was one of the most difficult degrees you could possibly pick. And there was a bit of a sadistic attitude from the teachers to make it as difficult as possible. The philosophy being that the job of an engineer is extremely difficult. So if you want to survive your engineering career, you've got to go through a very selective university degree. So it was very difficult for me to do it, but I loved it. And I know I didn't sail through it because it took me a long while to finish it, but I was one of the fastest in my class. And still it took me 9 years to finish that degree. Wow. And I loved it. When I left my old job in Bristol, I cried like a baby when I was telling my old boss that I would have gone. And having to drop my job in Milan to take on the baking career full time was very difficult for me too. My mom still hates me for that. She will never forgive me because obviously, come on, yeah. I'm out of that generation that parents would only accept the only acceptable careers would be engineering, architecture, medical doctor, I can't think of many others. anything else is not acceptable, let alone telling my mom that I was, becoming a baker full time. She wasn't very happy about that. I think that it's probably worth saying that before being a baker, I see myself more as a cook. That's what I've been doing in Hungary before Bake Off. Really, I started off working in my first restaurant when I was 15 years old, and I supported myself throughout university, working for catering services. So I've always been in the hospitality and cooking business. And it's a space where I'm very comfortable with. And almost incidentally, I've learned a lot about Italian cuisine. I was very lucky to do this during my university years in Tuscany, where I used to work for very, very wealthy customers that were passionate about food, that wanted to spoil their guests. So I had the opportunity to work with very good chefs in Tuscany as well. And I've learned a lot from them too. So again, I feel very privileged about the sort of upbringing I've had and the vicinity I've had with people that knew what they were doing, not only in the baking space, but also in the cooking space. So the Bake Off has sort of put me in that box as a baker, as an Italian baker. What I'd like to do is probably find new channels to disseminate what people don't know about me just yet, and the fact that I could mirror and extend what I've shown about Italian baking also in the space of Italian cooking.
You're listening to Over Here, Over There with me, Dan Harris, and co-host Claudia Kussler, and our special guest, the 2021 Great British Bake Off winner, Giuseppe Dell'Anno, whose two books, Giuseppe's Easy Bakes and Giuseppe's Italian Bakes, are out now on Amazon and all good bookstores. Don't forget to follow us on social media and check out our website at overhereoverthere.org. Now back to our show.
Giuseppe, as an Italian, how does your palate react to foreign food? Can a juicy burger in the US be tempting for you at any time, or a dim sum, or a New York pizza? Is that something that might intrigue you?
The short answer to that, Claudia, is absolutely yes. I'm 100% curious, and I am trying to educate my kids to be as curious as possible, especially when it comes to food. You can never say that you don't like it until you've tried it. When I moved to the UK in the early noughties, I had the stereotypical Italian attitude towards anything that was not Italian. So the first thing that I experienced in this country was the full English breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, these savages, how can they have savory stuff first thing in the morning? That is brutal. I cannot possibly have that. Obviously, the typical Italian breakfast is a caffè latte and biscuits or croissant or cake even, but never anything savory. But then the first time I had an English breakfast, I was hooked for life. And now I don't miss any opportunity to have one because I love it. I mean, I couldn't have it every day, but still, I cannot have enough. Similar to that, I'm very curious to try Asian cuisine. I don't know anything about it, or certainly I don't know enough. I cannot cook it myself very well, and I don't miss an opportunity to try it. When I was in New York in December, I had the best ramen soup I've ever had in a long time. It was called Korean ramen, and it was delicious. I had very good pizza in New York. So to answer your question, absolutely. I mean, I would try everything, with some exceptions. I mean, not at the level of I'm a celebrity, don't get me out of here. So I wouldn't eat any part of the animal that is too private for comfort. But I would genuinely try most things. And in a way, I think that a lot of my fellow Italians would be surprised by how much there is outside of Italy that is absolutely worth taking on board when it comes to food. We are raised with this mantra that Italian food is the best food ever, and to the point that people go, I don't know, I've got friends myself that went on holidays on the Maldives, very exotic places, and the first thing they look for is a pizzeria or a pasta place, and I'm like,
oh, no.
How, that is just offensive. Why? I mean, at least try it before you even try it. How can you possibly say that you don't like it? It's such a shame not to be open to try different things, because food usually tells you a lot about the culture of the place. And for example, one of the main things that I would love to do is to visit Japan, visit India, visit these places where you can actually try some genuine local food. I was very shocked when I had Chinese food in China, and it is so different from what you get in your standard Chinese restaurant over here. And it is an eye-opener. So absolutely, bring it on. The more exotic, the better.
I can remember when I was first in Great Britain, my British friends, many of them would point me to the nearest McDonald's as soon as possible, as if I needed some lifeline to keep me going here. So, America. Oh yeah, McDonald's is right down the street. Yeah. Hey, I'm a marketer by profession, and I would like to know how you would like the public, many of whom are your adoring fans, to think about Giuseppe Dell'Anno and your many talents. I mean, how do you want them in their mind to think about you now? Because you have these two loves. They know you for your baking. You have all this passion, and you have a PhD in engineering, but you're very much in their minds as a master now of Italian bakes and cuisine. What would you like them to think about you?
It's a difficult question to answer. I don't know how I would like to be perceived, but I know how I wouldn't like to be perceived in a way, Dan. There are a lot of Italian chefs around, and a lot of Italian chefs have found their fortune abroad, here in the UK, in the States. I wouldn't want to be perceived as a stereotypical Italian, white vests stained of tomato soup, playing mandolin and eating mozzarella dipped in espresso coffee, that sort of thing. There is a lot of stereotypical Italian profile going on abroad, and that's understandable, because obviously you've got to simplify things for people that are not familiar with the culture, and there is a lot of red, white, and green going on in Italian restaurants, and that in a way gives me the creeps. I really don't like it. I really don't like it when these Italian chefs, and I know for a fact that some of them do, make their Italian accent sound even stronger, because that makes them recognizable, that gives them likes, gives them followers. I don't mind. How do I put this? There is if you browse, as I do, social channels for Italian cuisine, Italian culture content, there is a lot of this sort of cultural war almost from Italians, especially Italians living abroad, that pineapple isn't allowed on pizza, cream is not allowed on carbonara. And that, if I find it funny in a way, because obviously that's entertaining, but that I don't think it does reflect very much the way I would like to be perceived. I would like to be perceived as somebody that respects carbonara for what it should be. You make it with guanciale, you don't make it with bacon, you make it with egg yolks, you don't make it with cream, by all means. But if you like cream on carbonara, by all means, be my guest. You shouldn't feel guilty because it's a sacrilege to put pineapple on pizza. If you like, I wouldn't eat it if I gunpoint. But if you like it and it floats your boat, you shouldn't feel like you're committing a crime by doing that. And I would like to be perceived as an Italian that I've got very strong Italian roots, very clear Italian driving force behind my cuisine and my baking, but that is absolutely open to anything that isn't Italian, or anything that steers away from the tradition. I like to think of food and cuisine as something that moves on and it's continually changing, very much like a language, I mean, you still study Latin and ancient Greek in school, but that doesn't mean that you don't speak Italian because it comes from Latin, therefore it's an abomination from Latin. You study Latin and you speak Italian, and Italian is a language that keeps, moving on with time. And food is the same. I mean, you can respect traditional recipes, but still be open to new things and be accepting on new trends. Some of them you're entitled to say you don't like, but you should be respecting those that who do.
So a strong Italian heritage, but you're an internationalist in a way.
I like that view. Yes. Yeah.
Please don't laugh, but I just recently came across a so-called pizza pretzel. And since I'm being from Bavaria, where a pretzel is quite a thing actually to do, and this very almost, it seemed like a sacrilege to put pizza stuff on top of a Bavarian pretzel. And I was kind of almost a little bit offended by it. But then again, I thought of an episode of Jamie Oliver when he put chorizo in a paella, and he got the shitstorm. He was right in the middle of it. And then I immediately backed off and thought, okay, I have to be more relaxed about things like that, I don't want to be and become a reactionist. And also my heart sank for a little bit there. I don't want to feel offended as a kind of a custodian of my country's food heritage. How do you see adaptations and variations? I mean, you've just said that you're kind of more open about it. And if you want to put cream in your carbonara, do it. So how do you balance the thing about value traditions, but also be innovating
I think there is a lot of power in words, and it all depends on how you're presenting it. So if you are putting cream in carbonara or chorizo in paella, and then you claim that recipe to be the recipe or the authentic recipe, then you do deserve a shitstorm, I would say. I don't think that that's what happened to Jamie, but if you're presenting your version and you're clearly stating that what you're presenting isn't the authentic version, but that's the way you do it and that's the way you like it, then the two things can coexist. But you've got to be careful in the way you present it. You've got to be careful in the way you're proposing that recipe, and you've got to acknowledge that is perhaps a deviation from the tradition. And that's, I suppose, a very simple way to making them coexist at the same time. I mean, I call myself a Britalian because I've almost spent 50% of my time in the UK and 50% of my time in Italy. And that shows in my repertoire. Dan was saying earlier that I've used Italian flair in my recipes during the Bake Off. And a lot of people has asked me whether I was doing that on purpose. And I was like, no, not really. It wasn't a conscious choice to put Italian flair in my recipes. Maybe that's the way it was perceived, but simply because Italian recipes is all I know. Therefore, I wasn't doing it on purpose. I simply was being driven by what I'm familiar with and by what I know works for me. But that doesn't mean that I don't make cupcakes. That doesn't mean that I don't make muffins. And in fact, in my latest book, I do see the benefit of that format because it's quicker to make. You've got fewer things to wash. And there is an advantage in making cupcakes. There are single servings, etc. So in my latest book, in fact, I have taken lots of traditional Italian cake recipes and changed them into a sort of cupcake, muffin, if you like, format, because it's easier to handle and it's easier to manage. And in that way, you've got the benefit of both. I've always said that my dream life would be to be able to spend 6 months of the year in the UK and 6 months of the year in the US, in Italy. That's because I could get the best of both worlds. And I genuinely believe that both countries could learn a lot from each other. And if they could find the middle ground, they would end up being better countries, both of them.
Very good.
And the same goes when it comes to cooking. If you can learn from the positives of a different culture than yours, then you can improve yours and others can improve theirs. And that is also a less divisive way of looking at foreigners' cuisine, because it opens your horizons rather than limiting them.
That's such an over here, over there way of life, which we appreciate. We appreciate hearing, Giuseppe. That's exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. So that openness of learning from each other across borders. So much appreciated. So Claudia, do you want to ask your other question?
Yes, please. Some say less is more when it comes to food. And to buy better and to waste less is the way forward. Do you see an increased appreciation of taste and quality, or actually a decrease in the US and the UK and Europe, of course?
Yeah, well, I haven't experienced the US enough to make a judgment call on that one, but I've certainly experienced the UK attitude towards food in the last 20 years. When I first moved to the UK, I had to go to the big Tesco in Milton Keynes to find mozzarellas because they couldn't find them anywhere in my local shop. Whereas these days you've got what they call deli cheese, Italian, French, German cheese everywhere, pretty much in even the smallest supermarket. So there has been an evolution in the local taste in the UK, I would say, and in Italy as well. When I left Italy 25 years ago, you couldn't find sushi places anywhere in the whole country. In my most recent visit to Rome, there were plenty of Asian parlors, sushi, Indian restaurants. So there has been a lot of globalization, if you like, in the best possible way across both countries. But the one thing that I'd like to stress when it comes to that, looking for quality, etc., when it comes to food, is that looking for quality doesn't necessarily mean looking for a more expensive grocery shops. It's quite the opposite, actually. The Italian cuisine is actually called cucina povera, which means poor cuisine, in that all the ingredients are very simple and cheap staples, mostly vegetables. And my mantra is that you can have very simple food and very nutritious and very tasty food using very, very cheap ingredients. There is a big discussion there to have, which I'm not going to get into, otherwise we'll stay here for hours. And the thing that, triggers me, especially in the UK, is why certain vegetables and fruit especially end up costing more than meat and fish occasionally in the supermarket. And I just cannot fathom what the marketing reason behind that is. But in Italy, you can still buy most vegetables for 1-2 euros a kilo. When I used to live in Milan, which is a very urban region, I could buy fennels for 99 cents a kilo. If I buy them here in Waitrose, they're at least £5 a kilo. And I'm like, how can we get people to eat more simple, nutritious food if the price tag is what it is? I find that very difficult to explain. And it's not just down to the fact that in the UK it's difficult to grow things because of the climate, because I find local apples costing more than apples that come all the way from Spain, or tomatoes that come from Morocco are cheaper than anything that is homegrown. And I genuinely don't know why. Clearly there is something that I'm failing to grasp behind these mechanics. But yeah, I mean, if I had a magic wand, I would like to make people appreciate how simple food can be great and good for you and easy to make. There is a cultural element there that is difficult to overtake. And that is based on the fact that I find in countries like the UK, it's difficult to make simple food look appealing. I had colleagues of mine when I used to work in an office, and they used to see my lunch, which was usually the leftover from the previous day's dinner. And one of them kept telling me, "Oh, but that looks very bland, Giuseppe. How can you possibly have bland food? In Italian, having bland food, that's unheard of." And I was having the most delicious chickpea soup. It does look bland. It looks beige. But you try it, and it's so nice and so good, so cheesy and spicy. It's lovely and delicious. But yeah, well, it's not deep fried and it doesn't have any melted cheese on. Therefore, it's not good. And that is the sort of attitude that I would love to challenge as much as possible. Also because those dishes are very easy and very quick to make. I'm hoping that, if I, in the future, I can grow my following enough to have books on this, have TV shows on this, to tell people, to share what I know, luckily, because of my upbringing, with everybody, so that it can become part of everybody's cultural attitude towards simple food. Yeah, fingers crossed.
You're an advocate for seasonality, correct? And as far as
100%
eating within seasons and...
Yes. I give my kids the snack box at school every day. And the easiest thing for us as parents to do would be to wash a bunch of grapes and, you give them to them. And I do that when it's grape season, but we are in January now. If you buy grapes today, they come from Peru, from South America, from South Africa, and I just cannot get, and they're very cheap as well. The price doesn't change. I mean, if you look at the grapes shelf in a supermarket, they are exactly the same 12 months a year. And I'm like, why? why is that okay? Tomatoes are supposed to exist only in the summer, and when things were like that, it's not like during the winter we would starve. You would eat whatever was available in the winter. These days kids have got no idea of what's the right season for what. They have peaches on their table in December. Strawberries, you can find them 12 months a year, and it just begs belief how that is even possible. Why would you buy that, knowing that has got thousands of miles on the back, thousands of CO2, that it must have been treated somehow to survive the journey from South America to England? Don't buy, give them clementines, because this is the season of clementines. Yes. And it's as easy to peel and much more in season. I'd love to explore more the mechanics behind the supermarket, because obviously there must be reasons why they do that. It might be, I don't know, maybe demand, or I just have no idea, but I'm genuinely curious to find out why.
Well, you just think of the global warming, the effect of global warming, of, transporting all that just to hit that price point, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. You should listen to another episode we did with a journalist from Germany called Dirk Steffens. And he has done recently a program on food and how to manage your own food supply at home in order to not only save money, but also to actually reduce the worldwide impact of the way things are produced. And you can make a big leap towards saving the planet by just eating right and by stocking up on the right thing, besides actually saving a lot of money.
You have similar. You both have similar philosophies, and it'd be very interesting to get you two together.
Team you up in a way.
Yeah,
I'd love it. I'd love to have that discussion. Yeah, why not?
You're listening to Over Here, Over There, and we'd like to thank some of our great supporters and friends, including Torben Lauritsen and Fenny Roseman at Content Technologies in Eurisburg, Germany. We'd also like to thank Tim and Catherine Mountain at Even Load Films and Productions, and Jeff and Jackie Gibbons in Cheltenham, UK. Now, back to our show. You mentioned your books. What are they about, and who are they aimed at?
I wrote them more with, what I'm about to say is not going to please my publisher, but I wrote them more with my own objectives in mind rather than a potential audience in mind. My dad has left us with a stash of family recipes. I've got them right there in the cupboard, all handwritten, 3 lines at best, all in quantities that were suitable for his professional job. So quantities that use like 3 kilos of flour, a cup of baking powder, nothing that you would do in a domestic environment. So I've always wanted to capture his knowledge in a way that I could pass it on to my kids. And he wasn't a very tidy person. My mum attempted actually to be, in a way, his PA, trying to write down all the steps of some of the recipes, and she managed to do that. Although, with her not being a baker, she didn't actually capture the most relevant bits. But I mean, she should be praised for trying at least. So I've always wanted to do that for my kids. And when I had the opportunity from the publisher to do that and to open up the audience to more than just my 3 children, I obviously grasped it immediately. And Italian Bakes, which was the first book I wrote, is all about timeless Italian classics. So you've got cakes in there that are, well known worldwide to be part of the Italian baking repertoire. But then while I was writing that, I did realize that some of those masterpieces, like, Rambaba or Pastiera, do take a lot of effort to make. I mean, you cannot whip them up on a Sunday afternoon when you're particularly lazy and it's rainy outside. And, having a family myself, I know exactly what it feels to be short on time. So in the second book, I try to focus more on recipes that are easier to handle, that can go in the oven in 15, 20 minutes or even less than that at times. So I kept it easy also from an ingredient perspective. So giving the ability to people to whip up cakes with whatever staples they've got in their cupboard. So the two books have got two different ethos. The first one is more on traditional, classical, timeless bakes. The second is more about convenience and make it quick, cut corners and enable everybody to bake. So they've got different audiences. The first one is probably more for an intermediate baker, although there are very simple recipes in that one too. The second one is for everybody. Even kids can get most of those recipes right, and they're very robust. So the pool of the audience is quite wider.
And they are available worldwide?
They are available worldwide on the usual platforms. So if you go to the typical online retailers, you'll find them there. But thankfully, my publisher is very keen on getting them distributed also in very small bookshops. So if you go to your local bookstore, if they don't have it, they will be able to get it. And I also sell them through my website.
And the address of your website is?
Sorry, yeah, that's right. I'm not very good at marketing, you see. The URL is my full name, GiuseppeDell'Anno.com. And I offer the unique exclusive of being able to sign and personalize the books, because they literally come from my desk. I've got my next order here to be shipped to Colorado in the USA this morning. And yeah, I can add whatever dedication you like me to.
Excellent.
One thing I wanted to ask you, which I asked you before, but I wanted to make sure that our audience is well aware of. They know you for your baking prowess and all that, but your knowledge across Italian cuisine is phenomenal. And is that something that you want to get across as far as your persona and like the Giuseppe brand, that you're more than just the master baker, but you have these master skills across Italian cuisine? Am I right?
Well, I wish you were. You're describing me like a master there. I'm not sure I am. I just love foods, and I have a very deeply rooted Italian heritage that shines through everything I do, not by choice, but almost incidentally. The biggest surprise I had to digest in a way through the whole of Bake Off and book publishing experience is the fact that I finally felt privileged by having this, because I've also always sort of assumed that this was a common thing to have, that every family bakes their cake on a Sunday for themselves regularly. Every family have got a stash of family recipes that they can share between themselves. And I realized that not everybody is as privileged as I have been with my upbringing. So my ambition today is to be able to find as many channels as possible to share this privilege that I've had with as many people as possible. And I find a lot of positive reception of that. There is a lot of people that didn't have that in their family, and they would love to create, to start off new traditions in their life. People that have used some of my cake recipes, and they have become their new traditional birthday cake. That fills me with joy, and it makes me feel very much accomplished. And I want to do more of that. I would love to be more on television. I surprised myself by how much I have enjoyed being on the screen. I was terrified before I saw the very first camera in the first place. But then I realized that it comes to me very effortlessly. And I don't blubber as much as I thought I would when I'm in front of a camera. Even baking live on live TV, which was terrifying at least, we really enjoyed it. So I'm hoping that somebody picks up some of my ideas and runs with them in the TV world.
I think that's in your future, and not too distant future as well. You're a natural. You're a natural.
Fingers crossed.
Claudia and I would like to thank our guest, Giuseppe Dell'Anno, whose 2 new books, Giuseppe's Easy Bakes and Giuseppe's Italian Bakes, are available on Amazon, as we talked about, and in all good bookstores. He also has personalized signed copies available via his website, giuseppedelano.com. And before we close, we'd like to remind our listeners that they can subscribe to our podcast by the button below. Over Here, Over There can be found on most major podcast platforms. You can also follow us on social media, and today's podcast show notes can be found on our website, overhereoverthere.org. If you want to support the podcast, please go to our Patreon page on our website, and thank you in advance for your support. Polite, insightful, humorous, and constructive comments are always welcome in any language, so please be in touch. Check out our website for our next unmissable podcast. Until then, thank you for listening to Over Here, Over There.